please.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming here. I guess I will also introduce myself. I'm a little bit less known than some of these amazing people here, but so if you didn't know, this is like a play on words associated with Dungeons and Dragons and economics, right? So this was something I'd like envisioned as I was younger. And it just stuck with it and I really enjoyed it. And so I made a YouTube channel. So prior to this, I was an applied econometrician. And during my work as an applied econometrician, I came across the work of Talcott Parsons. And that was my first introduction into cybernetics. And I really thought that that was absolutely brilliant. And then from Talcott Parsons, obviously, I got into Nicholas Luhmann and then so on and so forth, right? And so I've done some video series on quite a few topics. Some of them touch on cybernetics, some of them not. So these would be, I've done a video series on an introduction to cybernetics by Ross Ashby. I've done a few on communications theory. I did a video series on the triple helix, and some on stuff like stratification, special interest groups, and most recently, I've been working on communal ontology, specifically from the Orthodox Church. And so all of this gets wrapped up into why I am here doing this, right? And I want to explain what I see for 2024 and beyond when it comes to cybernetics, right? So this is this field, this cybernetics is something that said it's going to unravel the mysteries of communication between the between the animal, the machine, organizations. There was so much optimism in this. I mean, we've got individuals such as Turing, going through Wiener, Ashby, Beer, as we go through what happened, and then what can we do further? So for me, when we think about some of these arguments about artificial intelligence, network theory, and how these, derivatives of cybernetics have really overcome it, right? I think that this divergence is similar to the divergence of metaphysical theory in science, and that all of this is something that we're going to have to take into account. So with this, the goal here is going to be discussing why we still need cybernetics in 2024. What do I think is the future of cybernetics from my position outside of what my work is in the field of cybernetics, but what I think in our day-to-day lives is really impactful for cybernetics. And then I'm hoping that this overall outline works. So the history of cybernetics, I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with, right? So we have this development of artificial intelligence, network theory, and all of these other theories, but this parallels the evolution of metaphysics in modern science. So just as early scientists began to like tacitly assume metaphysical principles without like fully grasping and grappling with those underlying assumptions, we see modern technologists and theorists, specifically those in fields of AI, network theory, etc., often without direct acknowledgement or understanding of those cybernetics roots. And so if we think about this multidisciplinary, this transdisciplinary field, we really are trying to understand how systems self-regulate through feedback mechanisms. And all of this is important in computer science, AI, robotics, network theories, but they've diverged from their cybernetic origins and they've focused more on the specific application and the technological advancements rather than the broad systemic thinking that has characterized cybernetics. And so, again, this divergence follows the same path of metaphysics and modern science, where we have this fundamental nature of reality and being that come from our philosophical underpinnings, and yet we've moved past that. We've evolved past that. We no longer directly engage with the metaphysical questions, and they're just implicitly assumed on many occasions. And so if we look at the context of AI and network theory, these foundational principles of cybernetics, they just seem to be lost in the sauce. They're just kind of pushed aside for people to focus on the major application and increasing the technological advancements, which is good in many ways. But when we do this, when we lack the understanding of these cybernetic principles, this can lead to things like ethical and societal implications as not being fully considered on what is cybernetics. And so, with our emphasis on systems, feedback, and interconnections, we seriously need to understand the broader ethical and societal implications of these technologies, and that when we see the movement away from the underpinning principles of cybernetics in the fields, we should probably look at other things like economics, right? There's a big conversation happening in economics where most economists now, they come out from undergrad, grad school, they've done mostly math with a few introductory courses to economics, but they don't have a deep understanding and a deep knowledge of the actual theory and philosophy behind economics. So you end up with these really advanced dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models, but we don't understand what is going on in the actual society. So you are turning everything into first order. And I think that that limits our engagement with the technology, with the implications, and with the systems that is affected by it. So building off of that, right? So the integration of like AI and network theory without the foundational principles of cybernetics, to me, is the scenario where a mind is without a body. So it's a state of existence that is schizophrenic, right? So this is meant to like explain this critical imbalance where we have the possessing the ability to process the information, such as the mind, without the corresponding mechanism for the grounding, the self-regulation of the control, which would be the body in this context. So without cybernetics, these interdisciplinary studies of regulatory processes, communication and feedback loops, they're directionless. They operate in a potentially haywire manner because they don't have the focus of this broad epistemological standpoint that cybernetics provides. And so, because it has this comprehensive framework, and because this is the basis for how complex systems interact, adapt, and self-regulate, this is something that a lot of these systems, they buy in implicitly, but again, they don't have a purposeful manner. They don't have the control mechanism in their theoretical underpinnings. And so without these guiding hands, without these principles of cybernetics, I mean, modern AI and network theories, they risk becoming detached from real world contexts that they are meant to serve and interact with. So this detachment is problematic in many ways, right? So AI systems process data and they make decisions without adequately considering broader system dynamics. And I'm sure some people can point to like Holtzman models and stuff like that. But again, in the broader context, this is something that could be detrimental. And the same with network systems, right? So we're getting more technologically sophisticated, but it feels like we lack the sustainability and the resilience to make them making them vulnerable to like disruptions to like how we understand network theory and the stuff. So for me, this mind body understanding is really that we lack this physical integration with the social environment that everything operates in, which is what cybernetics really and clearly lays out in its principles of a balanced and integration theory. So not to beat on a dead horse on this one, we're going to move a little bit more. All right. So I just want to touch back on something that was stated in the previous discussion towards the end. So intentions and family and love of communications, right? So Peter said, you know, I knew what happened. I had communication without being directly communicated with. And for me, this is one of the most important parts of Orthodox theology, where I'm trying to connect Orthodox theology to communications theory, specifically from Ashby into Luhmann, right? Communication is an underlying force in our world. Just as energy is the capacity to do work and to bring about some change, communication can be viewed as the metaphysical energy that creates, modifies, and sustains relationships and systems within the cosmos. So it is through communication that entities ranging from particles to people to planets interact, influence, and interconnect with one another. So communication to me is the energetic emanation in Orthodox theology. It is a metaphysical reality. So in Orthodox theology, we have this intricate dance between the intellect and psyche. So, if we really try to understand the anthropological reality of what's going on in our lives and the theological implications as it's connected to cybernetics, we want to recognize the intellect, the psyche, as operationally closed but communicatively open. I think this is unbelievably profound. And this is why I got so deep into Orthodox theology, because it was the first place that I found from a theological perspective that really explained this in a way that made sense to me as, you know, as a baby cybernetician. So we have to look at this idea of determinism and freedom, action and receptivity. And this way enriches our understanding of not just our day-to-day life, but also our life within the divine. So the concept of the intellect, the discursive or dianoetic mind, possesses this fixed indeterminacy in its intrinsic composition. It nevertheless engages in a dynamic relationship with the external environment, is governed by laws of classical and quantum physics. But this does not merely act upon the intellect, but is also shaped by the intellect's active output. So in this model, humans are not just seen as passive recipients of divine action or environmental influence, but as co-creators in the reality, actively participating in the unfolding of the world through their intellectual and volitional activities. And so we have this concept of synergy. This view encapsulates the cooperative interaction between God's grace and humans' freedom. And we see this most well known in the Theotokos, Mary, the Mother of God, as she is the supreme example of this balance between fixed determinacy of the human intellect and the openness to divine action, such as when she says, "Let it be to me according to your word," Luke 138. This exemplifies the perfect harmony between human volition and divine will, where human freedom is fully realized in its surrender to and cooperates with God's salvific plan. So we have this reciprocity between the active and passive aspects of human existence that reflects a deeper theological truth of humanity as both actor and as acted upon, diviner and divined upon. And this suggests that human beings created in the image and likeness of God are endowed with this ability to co-participate in the divine life, to shape and be shaped by divine will. And so this relationship is marked by love, freedom, and mutual receptivity, this dialogical reciprocity. So when we think about the, what you doing? So when we think about this intricate relationship between the essence and energy distinction in Orthodox theology and modern cybernetic theory, this helps us really understand and explore the nature of God's interactions in the world. So this comparison is not only bridging the gap between the theological discourse and cybernetics, but also propels our understanding of cybernetics in general, because we can move into applications to physics, to broader dialogues in the nature of divine interaction. So we have the works of an individual such as Stoyan Tanev, right? So he was a PhD physicist who also worked in Orthodox theology. So he released a book on energy within Orthodox theology and physics. And then we also have Father Nikolaos Ludovikos, who is at the, I think, University of Aristotle in Greece. So anyway, his work on dialogical reciprocity very clearly reminds me of the communication theory of Niklas Luhmann, where we have this dynamic relational nature between human interaction, and this offers a true understanding of participation, of dialogue, and of communion. And communication is the grounding for all of that, right? Which is why it's dialogical reciprocity. And further, when we think about this energy essence distinction, we have this idea that God is transcendent from his immanence, right? So God is distinct from the transcendence to the immanence. We know God exists by the operations, but but how do we know anything about the transcendent nature of God that is beyond anything? It's incomprehensible. But when we look at operational closure and functional or communicative openness, this actually answers many of the questions associated with the transcendence and immanence of a divine creator. And so I think that this distinction mirrors this cybernetic principle of operational closure, but God is engaging with the environment through the open channels of communication and interaction. And so this leads to this convergence where we have this deeper understanding of how the divine energies operate within the creative world. We have Tane's exploration of energy from physics as it bridges this conceptual gap with Orthodox theology. We have Ludovicos on his emphasis on dialogical and analogical nature of the divine energies, highlights the relational and communal aspect of these interactions, suggesting that divine energies facilitate a dialogical relationship not only vertically between God and creation, but also horizontally among the created beings, which goes back to what Peter was saying earlier. So, in this whole framework provided by Father Ludovicos, we see a necessity of dialogical ascent, of synergy of created human freedom for the elevation to God. This is very closely aligned with Luhmann's communication theory, where we have social systems are constituted through communication, emphasizing the relational dynamics that give rise to societal structures. And so, again, Father Ludovicos suggests that the ecclesial dialogical synergetic communion is the means by which individuals and communities ascend to God, highlighting this importance of relationality and participatory relations in the divine. And so dialogical reciprocity is human existence. Relationality is human existence. And this is connected clearly between the work of cybernetics and Orthodox theology. So I want to further build on this idea of Nicholas Luhmann's communications theory. So this is the foundational process of social systems are constructed and perpetuated. And I don't need to speak to everyone, but there should be people that are going to watch this and are not fully understanding all of these nuances. So according to Luhmann, communication is not merely the exchange of information, but it's the complex interaction involving the mutual understanding and sharing of meaning. It is through communication that individuals come together, forming intricate networks of relationships, societal structures that define our existence. Communication is both the medium and the outcome of social organization, continuously evolving and reshaping the contours of human society. Now, in parallel to this, we have the work of St. Gregory of Palamas, where he introduces God's energies as the divine means of interaction with the world. Unlike the essence of God that we discussed earlier, which is transcendent and unknowable, God's energies are immanent and accessible, permeating the fabric of our very existence, our universe, and directly influencing the human experience. These energies are not static, but are dynamic. They're constantly in flux. They shape material and spiritual aspects of reality. And through these divine energies, we are offered some direct experience of the divine, and that fosters a deeper connection with God and enriched understanding of the world, which goes into some of the mysticism that Peter was talking about. So this comparison between God's energies and the communications theory, we can see how these dynamic forces continuously shape human society, our interactions with the world, how communication and divine energy facilitate the construction and evolution of networks, whether that be social, spiritual, a fusion, spatial. They underpin human existence. This is what enables individuals to transcend their isolated selves, engaging with others, with the divine in the shared space of interaction, relationality, and dialogical reciprocity. So moving on to the next. Oh, wow, I jumped through some stuff. When we look at the work of Ashby, we see the idea of variety, right? We have this potential of states that a system can adopt, but this cannot be fully captured or conveyed by a single transducer. This principle challenges conventional notions of information as a commodity, moves into information exchange as an inherently dynamic process. So a system's capacity to manage variety is crucial for its ability to respond and interact with its environment. This understanding of communication involves acknowledging the limitations of the transmission systems and is essential role in the heart of the dynamic exchange. And again, we go back to St. Gregory of Palamas. We have this distinction of the essence and energy. We have the uncreated and the eternal, and how it has a direct yet incomprehensible interaction with the divine. These distinctions allow for the participatory experience within God, and this challenges, some of the more simplistic notions of divine interaction as mere transmission, of just highlighting the depth and complexity of our relational engagement with the divine. And so I think this analogy is important when we think of the concept of communication and the concept of divine energies, as we see this as a shared emphasis on the dynamic relational processes that define both human and divine interactions. And so I think this continuous relational interaction between God and creation, this interaction is transformative. It allows humans to experience and participate in the divine, just as communications theory emphasizes the dynamic construction of social realities. The concept of divine energies is the reality, this participatory process of spiritual engagement and transformation. And so I think it's very easy to actually look at these as an analogy, that they highlight the limitations of communication, and they show that it's not just mere transmissions of information, that it's something more, that it's points to a complex reality where variety or the divine energies actually drive continuous change and development. And I think recognizing these parallels in these domains is important for moving cybernetics in 2024, as we see with mysticism on the rise, we see, people calling for the new sphere or the nous. I think everyone is looking at it and everyone is saying the same thing, that there's something going on. There's some type of spiritualism that is increasing. And I think this, for me, is a strong place for cybernetics, specifically because it opens itself up in its epistemological domain by the study of mechanism and not the study of the thing, to truly be in a transformative process when it comes to our relationship with the world and the divine. And so the last thing that really is that when we look at cybernetic theory, the energy essence distinction, we see these modern understandings of theology, of physics. We see pathways for cybernetics in 2024 and beyond. By integrating these theological insights with cybernetic principles, we can have researchers that can explore new dimensions of how systems interact with their environments based on this energy essence distinction, how information and energy are transmitted, and how relational dynamics shape the actual cosmos. So this interdisciplinary approach enriches the understanding of cybernetics by moving it into some of the other domains, first, second, third, into possibly the fourth, the meta system theory, and how with our comprehension of the divine, the universe, and the interconnections, we can really understand this. And I'm not alone. I know that, we have dialogue in Orthodox theology with, actor network theory of George Kapriv, physics such as Stoyan Tenev, Father Ludovicos, when it comes to Lacanian and other types of psychology. And so we have these openings, these new horizons for understanding the complex relational nature of divine and human interactions. And I think that this convergence offers this holistic framework that transcends disciplinary boundaries, that we can use to understand the cosmos, our place within it. And this lies at our intersection of the diverse yet interconnected fields of study.
Wow. Say something, don't just clapping.
Well, I mean, you've just eloquently expressed a sense that I've had for years. I mean, and I get chills listening to what you're talking about, because I hesitated talking about the fourth order, but I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm just thrilled to meet you and hear of your work. And thank you for giving such a thoughtful and comprehensive review of your work. I wouldn't think you're a baby cyberneticist at all. In fact, all credit to you for this integrative. Well, that's not the right word, but this expression of how science and theology, cybernetics and mysticism, if you want to call it that, can help us understand our co-creative position in the world. It's why we kind of started the College of Exploration for do what we wanted to do, and I'm calling it the Co-Explorer Project. It is very much a dynamic interaction. So I'm looking forward to carrying on this conversation and seeing what we can do together.
I'm not
Absolutely.
aware if anybody had done any work to build a bridge between cybernetics and theology. If you guys are aware of anyone before Joe?
I know of one other individual. He had a YouTube video series. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he did like a whole discourse on spiritual cybernetics. I was actually working on this at roughly the same time he was when I first got into Orthodox theology. Um, he uses more along the lines of Heidegger, and I think he does reference some of the work by Luhmann. Me specifically looking at relationality and participatory work. Like I did a video on unity and distinction and that connection to some of the work done by late Luhmann and how he references distinction, and then how George Spencer Brown's distinction and how that connects to like the Chalcedonian definition of unity and distinction. And I thought that that was really amazing. And then another way that I've like tried to connect this idea of communications is like, so Luhmann posits that only communication communicates. And I was trying to figure this out from like a philosophical or like a theological understanding. And then what I found out is there's this idea of perichoesis or interpenetration or circumnessio in theology. And I was like, okay, so what's going on here? And essentially is like, if we have two hypostases, two persons, Peter and Paul, they can't communicate their personhood to one another. They communicate by way of nature, like the higher hierarchy of ordering, right? So we don't communicate idiomatic to us. We communicate by way of nature. And so this is legitimately that only communication communicates, because I can't tell you who I am. You can't tell me who you are, but we can communicate within the higher order of what we are. Right. And so that was like some of the connections that I built off of in this, Orthodox theology, cybernetic frame.
When I first go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, I don't think that there's much that's explicit in the way that we've just heard that I'm aware of. But I do think that many in the field were aware of this. And indeed, it wasn't until I heard Vanilla Beer talk about her father, Stafford Beer, and his relation to the divine, for want of a better term, and his understanding of co-creation of things, that his work had it explained my observations of his work that had not been made explicit. You can go and listen to a recording on Metaforum from Vanilla Beer talking about how Stafford engaged in that. So I think there are cybernetic and systems scholars, for want of a better term, who may well have touched on the subject, but because it takes a certain amount of confidence to talk about these topics without being potentially put into a particular description of being out there on the edge or the fringe, that, you know, I don't mind talking about it now at my age. I mean, when I was 38, I had a conversation with a Sitka spruce tree in Alaska. And, you know, that could be termed a mystical experience. I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but in reflection and reading, I came to understand that this is not an uncommon experience. But how you have a conversation about this to share these experiences in a way that, you know, people can respect and honor the experience without being impolite about it. You know, I love what you're doing in terms of bringing the theological history and scholars in sociology and theology to bear, and weaving this story together with the cybernetic archival information or people that have worked in cybernetics. Great stuff.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have a question on any of that? Because I know I went by really quickly. Might have gone by a little bit too quickly, but I kind of wanted, there was so much information because trying to unpack all of that. So I don't know if anybody wants.
Are you doing this for a PhD? Or is it a
No.
PhD? Or if you've done your PhD, or where are you? Where are you personally, physically located, and where are you going?
I can talk to that offline.
Okay.
So yeah, this is kind of like a persona that I have as the Econmancer. My actual work is only tacitly connected to this.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so like I said, I
can
was
do that offline. Sure.
yeah. But yeah.
Okay, so we have a pioneer here building us a new bridge. That's a very good thing. When I first heard Heinz von Forst talking about his 18th camel, if you all know that, the 18th camel, I was thinking, wow, that 18th camel equals what we call God. God is necessary, even if it not exist. So the building up the bridge between cybernetics and the theology is a very important move, I guess. Congratulate Joe, doing pioneer work. More questions? Okay, so no more questions. Lisa, want to say something?
Well, I was just, Joe, I also am interested in, you know, a fuller picture of your interests. I taught middle school religious school for many years in the context of Judaic study and history. And so it's a very, you know, I was talking before about cognitive flexibility. And what I enjoyed about growing up in that realm was the ability to question everything and ask questions of adults. So what you were describing reminds me very much of those mornings and after school evenings with adolescents. So I also care very deeply about keeping imagination and the power of feeling connected to everything and co-creation alive. So I'd love to know more about you and your work. And it reminds me also of some of the stuff that I'm writing about in terms of eco-narratives. Other ways of knowing.
Yeah, totally. The best way to reach out to me, well, if you're like extremely curious about any of the things that I've done, my YouTube channel is the Econmancer. That's where I post most of this theological stuff because as Peter said, like getting into academia and holding some of these ideas oftentimes does have this type of like a possible negative consequence that I would like to avoid. Like it would be biasing my results and some of my more applied stuff. So I typically take this, and that's why I'm like in like a persona. That way I
Interesting.
don't, yeah.
Cloaking, you're cloaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I also appreciate the call out to a video